Hello, my name is Anne and welcome to a new video. On this video I'm going to talk about my top 10 favorite books of 2023, and I will record half of the video today and half of it tomorrow because I'd say because of lack of practice, it takes me a long time to record these videos and I grow very tired by the end of the video. So I'm gonna be good to myself and to half of the work today. Today I'm gonna talk to you about statistics, about my 2023 reading year, and then I'll go from book number 10 to number 5 in order. So for stats, I'm gonna use Storygraph. I always use Storygraph to track my reading. It's my favorite app of the ones that I've tried so far. And so I'm gonna start by saying that I've read 100 books this past year, and that was my challenge. The year before, in 2022, I managed to read 86 books, and I was very proud of that, but I was so close to 100, so I thought that I would challenge myself to read 100 books to see if I could do it. So I did. It's true that I read a lot of shorter books in 2023 because of that, because of my challenge. Also, I challenged myself to read 31 books in 31 days in the month of July when I'm off from work, and I did it. So I picked shorter books to be able to do that challenge. So usually my average book is over 300 pages, and most of them are always over 300. But because of this challenge, I picked a lot of shorter books. I think the longest book that I read in July was 250 pages, so they were all quite short. And it was a challenge, but it wasn't very hard to do. Also, reading 100 books this past year, I was very happy to do it. I was confident that I could do it, and I really liked my experience overall. Moving forward into 2024, I'm not going to challenge myself to read that many books. If I do so, then that's great, but I'm only going to challenge myself to read one book per week, so 52 books in total. And we'll see. I guess I will probably read more than that, but I don't want to push myself too hard. I think 52 is great. Also, I encourage you not to compare yourself with me. I know there's many people who read more than I do, but most people don't. And that's okay. If you read a book a month, that is amazing. If you read a book every couple of months, that's good too. We've all got our lives. We're all busy and we have our priorities. And reading is my main hobby, and I really enjoy it, and I try to read all the time. So that's why I could do it, but I don't expect everybody else to do the same. So, as I've said, July was my best reading month, followed shortly by August and then December. And I feel like it's always the same way. I'm off from work in the months of July and August, so that's when I read the most. And then December, I don't know, I'm always in the mood for reading in December, and also it's the end of the year, so I want to read as many good books as possible by the end of the year, so it's always a good month for me. As for genres, my most read genre is fantasy, and I think that it always will be. And I think that this is a good representation of what I like reading. I do read most things, most genres. Nowadays I'm reading almost exclusively fiction, and inside fiction my most read genres are fantasy, romance and science fiction. There's also big LGBTQ representation, and I also read quite a few contemporary books. There are other genres that I read from, but these are my preferred ones for sure at the moment. My average rating was a 3.98, and it was a little bit over 4, but I did make some changes by the end of the year, looking at how I rated my books and then what I remember from my experience reading those books, and then conversations that I had about those books maybe throughout the year, or people that I've listened to talking about the books, I've lowered some of my ratings. So a 4 is a good representation of my reading. This year I've DNF'd many books, and I did that on purpose. I don't want to spend time reading things that I'm not enjoying. So my lowest rated book was a 3 this year. I've had quite a few 3s, but nothing lower than that, because I've DNF'd over, I think, 11 books in total. And I feel very good about that, and I still want to do that next year. I want to continue doing that. And yep, so I've had 3-star books, which for me, a 3-star is an okay book. And then all the way till a 5, which is an amazing book. Those were the stats that I wanted to talk about. And before I start talking about my best books of the year, I want to mention that I reread a few books, quite a few books. And I do want to mention one of them, because it didn't make the list, but not because it's not deserving of it, but because it was a reread. I'm not including any rereads on this list, and that was The Pillars of the Earth. And there are other books that I reread this year that I really love, that are all-time favorites for me. But this one, it was special for me because I read this for the first time over 15 years ago, and now I reread it. It was the second time that I read it, and I loved it. And if it was up for the running, this would be in the top 5 of books for this year, for sure. So I quickly wanted to mention The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that these books are ranked by my own personal enjoyment and the emotional impact that they had on me. I'm pretty sure that I've read other books this year that other people might consider better than the ones that are in my top 10. But I mainly rank by enjoyment. I don't really talk about the quality of the book, also, although I do feel that all of these books are worthy of being in a top 10. I think they are all very good. But anyway, so I just wanted to mention that number 1 is not necessarily better than number 10. It's just how I felt ranking them. So they are all very good. They are all favorites. They are all easy 5 stars for me. The 10th book on my list is Wicked Beauty by Katie Robert. This is the 3rd book in the Dark Olympus series. I discovered Katie Robert and the series last year. I read the first 2 books. The first one was great, the second one was okay, and now this one is my favorite so far. So in this society there are these ruling lords and ladies, and there's this free spot up for the taking, so there will be a competition, and whoever wins will become this very powerful lord or lady. And also there's another prize, which is whoever wins will get to marry Helen, who I believe, if I remember correctly, is Zeus's sister in this world. So yeah, she doesn't want that. Actually, she wants that spot for herself, so she's gonna enter the competition. And apart from her, Achilles and Patroclus, who are a couple from the very beginning, will also enter the competition. And the 3 of them, they bond and they grow a relationship. And actually the plot was quite interesting and the romance was great. I really loved it, and I really love Katie Roberts' smut. So yeah, she's become one of my top favorite romance writers, and I'm so happy that I discovered her. Also, I discovered a new love for romance that I didn't know that I had. So yep, that was my number 10. Number 9 on my list is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I do own a copy of Station 11 here, but I'm not gonna pull my books out. I only own a few of the ones that I'm gonna mention. I haven't collected them all yet, so I will just put them on screen. Emily St. John Mandel wrote this dystopian, this pandemic story quite a few years ago. and I found it so interesting. I do really love dystopian as a genre. Also, I like the element of time jumping, which you'll see more of in this list. And I also like following different POVs, so it had all of that. So we follow quite a few people before this outbreak, during and after, when society collapses. And I found everything so interesting, but especially something that I think is not very much explored in other dystopian stories is the meaning and importance of art and beauty, even when people are just trying to survive, even when society is no longer. And we follow a troupe of artists who travel around playing Shakespearean plays. We also follow this comic book author and the impact that her work had in another person. And finally, there's also this museum of civilization. So this is when society has collapsed. And so this person creates this museum of everyday objects and the history related to each object. And I thought it was so interesting, so original and beautiful. And yeah, I think that most people will like this. The previous book, I do not recommend to everyone, but this one I do. And yeah, it was so great. So this could have been easily in a higher spot in my ranking, but you know, it's still great. Even as number 9, I still love it. I wouldn't change a thing. And it had a big emotional impact on me. The 8th spot on my list is For Normal People by Sally Rooney. I didn't really have high expectations for this book. I thought that I wouldn't really like it, but I loved it. And that's mainly because of how attached I grew to these characters, how much I cared for them. So also, I think this is very true to First Love. I don't mean to say that First Love is the same every single time, but it felt like a very real story. So we follow a boy and a girl in high school and then in university. And when they are in high school, he's very popular and she's quite the opposite. There is also a big class difference between them, and that plays a big role in their relationship, that and the whole popularity thing. And then in university, their roles change, so she becomes the popular one and he's a nobody. And so throughout the years, they cannot really be together because of what other people might think and their image of them. And so, yeah, but they still feel very attracted to each other. They have this like attraction that they cannot really explain. And so they meet throughout the years at different points, and yeah, we follow their story, their friendship, and their love story. And yeah, I read on Goodreads on a review that this was like When Harry Met Sally, but soul destroying. And I think that's a great way of putting it. So I do want to read the rest of books of Sally Rooney because this was quite a surprise. And yeah, I love it. I wish I had read it sooner when I was younger. I think this would have become my favorite book of all time, but I still really appreciate it. Now, on the 7th spot on my list, I'm actually cheating a little bit because I'm going to include 2 books instead of 1. So this year I've read 2 books by the same author, and even though they are quite different, I couldn't choose. So those books are The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia and Mexican Gothic by the same author. The Beautiful Ones is a Regency romance with a touch of magic, and that makes a big difference for me. That made a big difference. So I've enjoyed Jane Austen's books in the past, but they're not a favorite of mine. But The Beautiful Ones was really great. So we follow Nina, one of the 3 POVs, who is a debutante. She's coming out this spring to society. Her cousin Valerie is teaching her how to move around society, but her cousin is actually quite the villain. And Nina is the opposite. Nina is very kind, quirky, she loves insects, and she has telekinesis powers, which her family disapproves of. So she's never really learned how to use her powers. But then in comes Hector, who is an entertainer who also has telekinesis powers, who approaches Nina to help her with her powers. But that's actually an excuse so that he can come closer to Valerie, who she had an affair with in the past. So Hector seems to still be in love with Valerie. And so we follow these three people, and there's quite a bit of drama, very interesting, very lovely. And what I really like about Moreno Garcia's writing, something that I don't really find that often, is that her books are so immersive. I could picture the scenes so well in my mind, and they were so beautiful. So yeah, I want to keep reading from her for sure. And Mexican Gothic, the other book by this author, is, yes, a Gothic book. I was a bit scared that it might be scary, but it wasn't. It was just very atmospheric and very immersive, as the other book that I mentioned by her. So in Mexican Gothic, we follow Noemi, who is this young girl, unmarried, very popular in society, very strong-willed, who receives a letter from her cousin, who just married into a very old English family, who now lives in their mansion, like alone in the mountains. And so Noemi thinks that her cousin is quite distressed in her letter, so she goes there to visit her, to make sure everything's okay, and see if she has to maybe rescue her cousin from her new family. And so she gets there. It's a very old house, quite spooky. There's a graveyard, there's fog all around, and they're like alone in the mountains. And from the very beginning, she thinks that her cousin's family is quite odd, but her cousin doesn't really make a lot of sense. She appears to change her mind sometimes, so she doesn't really know if something's wrong, but she has this feeling that something is wrong. So she stays there for a while, and so we follow the story of this very creepy family. Everyone except for the younger son is quite creepy. The younger son seems to be, quite fond of Noemi and seems to want to help her, but maybe holds secrets from his family. And I really liked everything about the book. I couldn't put it down, and I think that most people will definitely enjoy this. So that is it for Silvia Moreno Garcia. I can't wait to read more from her, as I said. The sixth book on my list is Book of Hours by Letty McHugh. Letty McHugh won the Borbillion Prize this year, a prize dedicated to chronically ill and disabled authors. So she, who has MS, when she was in the middle of the pandemic, she had a really bad episode, and she remembered those medieval books that would bring comfort in your darkest times. And so she decided that when she came out of that, she would write a book like that. So she wrote Book of Hours, a collection of short stories, or short essays, I'd say, and poems. And it's very beautiful. I do think that it accomplished its goal. It can be quite comforting. It was very informative for me, and beautiful. It is a very short book, and it is available online for free, so you could all go and read it for a comforting, good but sad time. And it was lovely. My first 5-star book of the year, and very deserving of being on the list. Okay, number 5 is Romantic Outlaws, The Extraordinary Lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and Her Daughter Mary Shelley by Charlotte Gordon. This was such a treat. It is a biography of these two remarkable women. Mary Wollstonecraft wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, and Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. And so I've always wanted to read Frankenstein, and so this year I read these two books back to back, and I loved my experience doing that, and especially Romantic Outlaws was really wonderful. It was so interesting, and I'm not a biography or a memoir person, but I didn't know about Mary Wollstonecraft and how special she was, and also Mary Shelley. I knew very little about her, and it was so interesting. And I really loved the structure of the book. Every chapter, every other chapter is about one of these two women, and it was fantastic. And seeing how Mary Wollstonecraft impacted on her daughter's life and her beliefs, even though they didn't meet because she died after she gave birth to her daughter, Mary Shelley. So that is quite sad, but anyway, I really loved it. If you are interested in feminist history and feminist literature, I highly suggest Romantic Outlaws. Number 4 is Daughter of the Empire, the first book in the Empire trilogy by Raymond E. Feist and Janie Wirtz. And this year I've read the first 2 books in the trilogy, and the first one is my favorite for sure. I've discovered these books through other booktubers who have also read them this year, and if you have read them or if you want to read them, I highly encourage you to check out the channel, The Library of Alexandria, where you will find discussions on the books that were very fun and interesting. So this trilogy is a political fantasy, a bit low in the fantasy, at least in the beginning. And we follow Mana, who has just become the ruling lady of her house, her noble house, in this fantasy world inspired in feudal Japan. So honor is a big thing, and there are strict rules about how you can act and how you can interact with other people. So she has to use her wits, but also follow the rules to make sure that her house survives, but also thrives in this society ruled by men who want us, where everybody else or every other ruling powerful houses want to see her just lose and just her house to disappear. And it was very intriguing, a bit slow paced, but it didn't bother me at all. And yeah, one of the best series, the best fantasy series that I've ever read. So I can't wait to finish the trilogy, and I will make sure to share my final thoughts. And now we are at the top 3, and I adore these books. They could all be number 1. But anyway, number 3 is Greenwood by Michael Christie, which I discovered through Canada Reads, which was a great hit for me, and I will continue to read the books in Canada Reads this year in 2024. So Greenwood is mostly a historical fiction book, and we follow the different generations in the Greenwood family, from the youngest person, the youngest generation, up until the origins of this family. So we go through each generation into the past and then again into the future, like the rings of a tree. And I really like that structure and that element of jumping in time. I always love that. And so the book starts with Jake, who is the youngest in the family, who lives in our future when there are no more trees because of climate change. Well, there are a few in tree sanctuaries, and Jake works in one of them as a tourist guide. So yeah, rich people go to tree sanctuaries on vacation. And then we go back, we go through each generation until the Greenwood brothers, which was my favorite, the most interesting for me. And I really cared for those characters, especially Everett and other people he meets along the way. But everything was so great, so interesting, so moving. I really loved how every member in the family had a special relationship, though different, with trees. And yeah, it was so interesting. You could also call it like eco-fiction. It does talk a lot about nature and trees, and yeah, I felt when I was reading it, I felt like it was written for me. It really reminded me of my favorite book, 100 Years of Solitude, although I think that might just be me. So anyway, I do highly recommend Greenwood by Michael Christie. Number 2 is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. I've listened to the audiobook and I think that's the way to go because it was such a great production. It is a collection of short stories in a shared universe and they all go chronologically, and every story is narrated by a different narrator, and it was so good. But anyway, the story itself is amazing. I really loved it. So I'd say it's a dystopian novel, a pandemic novel. So we follow people, different people. Some have related to others and some are not. And we start at the beginning of the pandemic when the virus spreads out. It's actually scientists who are working in the Arctic who, unbeknownst to them, unleash a virus, a prehistoric virus, and yeah, we follow different people and we see how society evolves because of this virus. And yeah, it was so moving, so sad, and so interesting. I always love dystopian novels when you can really see how society needs to evolve to adapt to this new reality and relationships with people, how they change. I really loved it. So for the longest time, I thought that this would be my favorite book of the year, and it could very well be. So if you are strong enough, maybe, if you don't shy away from dystopian novels, from pandemic stories, which I would understand if you would not be interested in those. If you are ready to read something like this, I highly recommend that you do, because all the stories were a hit for me. There are some that are better than the others, there are some that are amazing, but all of them I really loved. And the ending quite surprised me, so yeah, How High We Go in the Dark might be my top recommendation of the year. Finally, my best book of the year, the book that should be required reading in schools, the one that made me cry the most, and the book that makes the world a better place is Wonder by R.J. Palacio, which is a middle grade book, a book for people from all ages, and that would benefit so much children and adults alike. I read this book and it made me feel so good inside by the end of it. The ending is so hopeful, but it is quite sad at times. So we follow August, who has a facial difference, who has just started school because he's been homeschooled until now. And we see how people react to him when they see him and how he interacts with other people. We also follow other POVs like his sisters, which I found very interesting. And yeah, it is a roller coaster of emotions, and it teaches so much on empathy, and I think that all people who have a disability will feel represented in this, and this will bring so much learning and hope to everyone who reads it. So I highly recommend it again. And yeah, it was so moving, and I just couldn't put it anywhere else. This has become my new favorite. I will reread it again, and I will recommend to everyone from now on. So that was the best books, the 11 in the end best books that I've read in 2023. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got a new recommendation for your reading list, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.